Good morning, folks, and welcome to another great edition of Money Truth Moments with our very own money whisperer, Judy Copenbarger. How are you, Judy?
I'm great, Carlos. So good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I've been looking forward to our show because I know that today's show, we're following up on other questions that business owners have asked, as well as some other viewers that want to know some answers, right? And so, folks, if you're just joining us, please make sure that you follow Judy at judycopenbarger.com. We're going to talk about our website. We're going to talk about resources. In the last several weeks, we've answered questions from the viewers. So make sure that you tune also and look at some of those previous recordings so you can get some of your questions answered. So today I want to just jump right in because I know it's a jam-packed show full of questions. So you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's do this. So we're talking about folks, business folks who are just maybe potentially starting out a business. And some of these questions are from those type of folks, as well as those that have a business already established. Question that keeps coming up, and I'm sure it's not only for a new audience, but it would help out is, what experience do you have to navigate the complex world of financial planning?
Wow. So it's a background question for me, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, a bunch. I've been doing this for a while. I think the biggest experience is my experiences with our own businesses and our family's businesses. But I do have formal education. So I have a background as a CFP. I'm also that's certified financial planner, and then all these initials, right? AIF. I think that's an important one when it comes to financial strategy and financial planning, because I'm a accredited investment fiduciary, which means by law, I have to prove I'm doing the right thing for the client and not just selling products or, gathering assets to manage or something like that. So I think the fiduciary is a big deal. I have a background in tax. I have a law degree. And then for business, from a business perspective, I do have an MBA, which is a master's in business administration. So that whole curriculum was about managing business, all the financial aspects and development aspects of a business. So I've kind of been around the block with my own thing, but I've got some book learning as well.
That's awesome. And Judy, also explain to folks too that you've been at this for a long time, right? What was your passion for you to get started with into the financial world?
It started with basic financial planning and like retirement planning. And I was way far from it. I was early 20s. And it occurred to me, I was working in a little office in another state. And I love the service and I love the business aspect of it. But it occurred to me I could help a whole lot more people if I had the degrees and credentials myself. And at that point in my life, I was very interested in helping pastors and missionaries and folks that are in the 501c3 world, helping make the world better. I was really interested in helping them. And I discovered all these pastors that would serve their communities and serve their congregations for years, decades, and then end up really with nothing because they would live in the parsonage, and any extra that they had, they'd be helping their people. And then when it was time for them to retire, they didn't have savings. The church was now taking care of a new pastor's family. And I just didn't think that was right. And so I found tools and started learning how to help those kind of people. And then it just kind of grew. So now I have a lot of, churches and ministries that I work with, but mostly families. And a lot of them have closely held businesses with easy for you to say, with subsidiaries. And so a lot of folks in business seem to be attracted to the business model that I have, and I'm able to help them. And it's awesome.
That's great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that after a few other questions as well. So folks, thanks again for joining us this morning. If you're not following Judy, please do so at judycopenbarger.com. Another business question that came up, and I know that this actually, based on what they're asking, is potentially they're looking to start up a business, right? So what entity structure usually works the best, or what you recommend, usually if you're thinking about starting a business?
Yeah. So people think like, should I incorporate? That kind of a question, right? So, and generally, yes, but it's a matter of timing for most startups, for a small business that you're starting in, the back bedroom or out in the garage, if you're manufacturing something, or, something at the dining room table where you just have a great idea and you start putting it together. Usually it starts as a sole proprietorship, where it's just a place you keep on a C form on your individual taxes, where you have expenses and you make some money, and then that all kind of goes into your income. And that works for a while. And I would say until you have close to 6 figures of revenue in your business, if it's a startup, you probably don't need to incorporate. That being said, this is not generic advice, but it's kind of sounding that way. If you have a high tort liability or high liability kind of a business, if it has to do with real estate where somebody might get hurt on the property, if it has to do with a product that people are eating, or a product that, is around their body where somebody could, perceivably get hurt, and then you're going to, end up holding the bag. If it's anything medical, even construction, if it's construction related, people get hurt, on construction sites. So if you have a higher liability business, you might want to incorporate a little sooner, just for that protection. So if something goes wrong at work, they don't come after your personal assets or, take your home or something like that. So that's usually about when you would want to incorporate at that mark. And the reason I would say that is once you incorporate, there are formalities that must be met. There are costs associated with incorporating. You've got the setup costs. You're going to have a separate tax return now, that cost, if you're not an accountant yourself. And so but the hassle factor and the cost, that's usually when it makes sense to incorporate.
Got it. What about other entities, such as we've also heard, and I think we've had these conversations before on previous shows, like an LLC versus a corporation and all that stuff too. Can you just talk about a little bit about the difference from a corporation and the LLC?
Yeah. Well, a corporation can be a C or an S corporation. And the one I'm describing, which is usually for a startup, is the S corporation, where all the income passes through you as an individual or as a couple. A C corporation has more layers that can act as liability protection, but there's a pretty different tax structure to that. Mm-hmm. So if it's a substantial company, or if you've grown to that level, a C corporation at some point will make sense for you. But if it's under $1 million, maybe even under $2 million, depending on the nature of your business, an S corporation will probably work. Now, to distinguish a corporation from an LLC, people hear LLC all the time. That stands for Limited Liability Company. And so that is a way to limit liability. So the whole purpose of designing that kind of a corporate structure is to keep your assets separate from your business. So it's like you put on one hat as a person, another hat as a CEO or president of your company. Two totally different entities, two totally different financial profiles. Everything is separate. So it does limit liability. It can also give you an advantage for the expenses that you can take. For example, if you have real estate, you can depreciate your real estate and maybe write off some of the, if it's a rental, right? Write off some of the improvements. You put in some bushes and some new landscaping, and you can write that off. If you have a management company for real estate, now you can write off when you go look to buy more property, when you have your minutes meetings, you go out to dinner and have your minutes meetings with your team and your other officers, you can write off part of that dinner, right? So before you couldn't, now you can. So management companies for real estate holdings is really a good idea and can help you a lot with taxes.
Awesome, and I appreciate you explaining that too. So folks, you've heard it, also the differences between corporations and LLC. Watch the beginning of the show also when Judy talks a little bit more about what entity structure may work better for you getting started. And if you're already in a structure, take a look at also maybe some other options moving forward as well. So another thing that's been asked several times, especially with folks who are just starting out or are in the process already a few months into their company or maybe a couple of years, is should they take on more debt, or should I take on debt? All right, especially in business. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a tough one because none of us like to see extra risk, and debt comes with the risk. But most successful companies don't start with nothing. There are a few, that have started with nothing and just a really good idea, and a couple of shoestrings, maybe some duct tape. But most companies need something, even if it's just, basic marketing or advertising, depending on what you're selling or what your, service you're providing. But you've got to have something. So many startups happen because somebody who's passionate about what they're doing as a hobby or a great idea that they have, they put their own money in, blood, sweat, and tears, and their own money. Mm-hmm. And then you start recruiting your kids and your siblings and your neighbors and everybody else to help you. And you try to, get them on the payroll to help, or to volunteer to help you build the business. And so at some point, it makes sense to spend some money. And if you have it, that's great. If you don't, you have to leverage it. So one way to leverage it is to borrow it personally. Another way to leverage it is to borrow it from other people. And so that's where you can do a capital raise. You can get money from other people who now are invested in your business, either through debt instruments or they actually own stock, right? You could do it either way or a combination. And so now you've got people that are going to be helping you take the profit. And so you got to be really careful about how much profit you give away, how much percentage you give away. You never want to give away more than 50% of control of anything that you're running, right? Unless you're mature in your business and you're ready to divest, and you're ready to retire or go build another one. And so those are some things to think about when it comes to debt. Of course, you always want to be mindful of how the debt will be paid back and the cost of it, right? Which in the last decade or so has not been a big issue because money's been pretty inexpensive. Most experts are pretty confident that's about to change in our economy for several reasons, political reasons and economic reasons. So if you need to borrow money, just be really mindful of what that looks like when you pay it back. And just as an aside, it's a little off topic, but make sure when you're thinking about your debt structure and your business plan that it's not just pie in the sky. I'm so passionate it has to work. There are businesses where that happens and you hear about the success stories, but most businesses fail. And the reason they fail when they're, in their first 5 years is because they're undercapitalized. Either the debt is inadequate or it's too expensive or the business plan just didn't work. It didn't pan out because it was not thorough. So be careful out there. And if you do take on debt, it's not a bad thing. You just want to do it in a wise way.
And also talk to somebody, right, that can help you along those lines, which is what we're going to get into a little bit later. And folks, if you're just joining us, again, thanks for being here this morning. Make sure that you're following Judy at judycopenbarger.com. And we're going to talk about some of the resources or all of the resources are available at Judy's website as well, too. So stay tuned for that because I think it's very valuable information that you guys need to have, especially if you're starting a business, family is already, you're looking for those financial answers as well. So we'll get to that in a moment. We talked about should I take on debt, but let's just say we do have already, we kind of got the ball rolling on here. What would you recommend and how do we pay for expenses, right? Especially if we're starting out. What's a good way or a good way to do this, a good practice?
Well, I talk to families all the time and it's like, you need a spending plan. It's not the B word, budget, right? I don't like budget. It's like diet, what you can't have. Yeah. Plan is what you get to spend, what you get to choose to do with all of those dollars that you have, cash flowing. And so how are we going to do that? So in a business, it's the same. It's planning, which most people plan more in their business than in their household. I wish it was the other way, but what are my expenses going to look like? So this is where you can have an accountant help you. You can have a business expert help you with what your margins should be. How much should I spend on staff? How much should I spend on my location? If I need a warehouse or if I need an office building, how much should I be spending on that percentage wise? What should I spend on insurance? What should I be taking home for me? If I'm the CEO of the company, how do I do that and still have enough dollars to develop either my product or market my services? How do I allocate all of those dollars for the expenses? And that's just coming down to, the business model that you have, the business plan that you have in place and how you're spending, and then the discipline to actually do it.
Got it. Excellent. And, I think now it's a good transition to really talk about judycopenbarger.com. You talk a little bit about your website. I think this is very valuable information that folks need to know. And guys, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you that the big secret it is, a lot of this is So make sure that you are take the time to do it. So talk about your website and some of those resources.
Well, you could call it free or you could call it priceless.
Right. There you go. I like priceless better for sure.
It is decades of stuff that works, wisdom that works, tools that work, visuals and stories and templates, and like we were just talking about the spending plan for a business. Where do I start? How do I know? Well, there's tools for that at judycopenbarger.com in the course. So you can go there, judycopenbarger.com. One of the things that is available there is access to the Money, Truth, and Life online mastery program. And that is a course that we put together. It's a whole course of all the 5 pillars of money: taxation and legal things like entities, like we're talking about today, insurances, cash flows, investments, bears and the bulls, economic, things that you need to know. It's all there, and you can just take a class at a time or whatever. Take all the classes if you want. It might take a couple of weeks to take it down, but get your notepad, take notes, get in there and learn. And it's very foundational education on what you need to know when it comes to small business and personal finance. So you can go in there, Money, Truth, and Life online mastery program. There are also all kinds of videos, all kinds of articles that will help you. And that'll give you access to us too, over here at judycopenbarger.com.
Excellent. Talk about also your best-selling book, which is Money, Truth, and Life.
And Life, right? Yeah. Money, Truth, and Life.
Yeah. Congratulations. It's still doing very well. And I want to make sure that folks also know about the book and your passion for writing a book as well.
Yeah, well, that's been out a few years now. It was a long time in the making, but it's just a very primer level, although it goes, I like to say it goes from grade school all the way through graduate school on some of these concepts, because some get very complex and convoluted, but I've tried to keep it very simple for someone who doesn't have a financial background or didn't learn, grow up learning all of these things and managing their own portfolio. It's how to know what you need to know to get where you want to go. And I should put that on a t-shirt, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll help you do better. And what happens is when people give me feedback and we're sharing, what they learned and how they've applied what they've learned, they'll say, wow, if I would have known that 20 years ago, I could have avoided a big mistake that took 10 years from which to recover. Or we were just about to do that until we read that. And now we know why not to. So the book is full of real stories of real people. Some are our stories, things that we've learned along the way, good, bad, and ugly. But real client stories over the years of doing something really well and how it really helped them. And then making mistakes or relying on the wrong person or the wrong subject matter expert, where it's like they should know better, but they didn't, how would they? And then they made a mistake. So that's all there in that book. It's available anywhere bestsellers are sold. So it's Money, Truth, and Life. It's mostly green. So if you see it, you'll know. And it's available at Barnes and Noble and Target and Books A Million. And the Kindle version always is at Amazon, right? It's a bestseller on Amazon. And so you can go to Amazon and get it. And it's not a big investment, but I'll tell you, it's one of those books you kind of want to keep handy. Especially this time of year, people are doing their corporate taxes due, next week, individual taxes due next month. And they're starting to really think about money this time of year. It seems like people at the end of the year, like right after Christmas, they go, shoot, there's some stuff I should do before the 1st.
Yeah.
And then at tax time, those are the 2 times people are kind of forced to think about finances, people that aren't regularly doing that. So this is the time of year, and it's a resource you want to have handy that you can just have on the shelf and grab when you need it. I mean, you can always take the course and learn and do better. But having that book together, right there with you, I think would be really helpful. Good resource.
Yeah. One thing that I really love about the book is like you just talked about it, is sharing those stories, right? You have stories there. And if you're just joining us, I mean, this is something that you've also shared with folks as far as like a lot of great stories from your clients over the years. And it's, when you get to know Judy to the level of what we've been doing for a while, you get to know she's the real deal with that, and I think that folks can connect with that, can appreciate that it's not just me, going through this. You've gone through it. You provided solutions for folks, and I think that's very valuable. And I think it says a lot about you and your character as well. And I think we all, as audience and myself included, appreciate what you're sharing with everyone too. So thank you for that.
Well, my pleasure. And I appreciate you taking the time to say that. It means a lot to me to be valued and needed and appreciated. So I appreciate that.
So let's get back to some helping folks with business, right? So we talked about basically about the if we should take on debt. We should talk about how we should be paying for expenses. So now that I'm gonna start or I'm already established, what deductions should I be keeping track of, right? What are some key things that I should be like, oh, I need to make sure that I write that down, for the end of the year or different things like that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a broad question because it depends on the kind of business. It's one of those
Right.
logical answers. It depends. It depends on the information. But obviously, there is probably space. And if you don't have space for doing whatever the business activities are, you at least have computers and people that, push the buttons on them. So there's going to be that operational category of expenses that you have. And again, it depends on your business, but the operations is one. Another big area is development. And that's going to be your marketing, your advertising, your branding, your SEO, if you're doing some kind of an online business. In the old days, it was mailers or it was catalogs, with pictures of your products and things like that, which there are still some doing that. So there's the whole development side. And then there's the personnel side, so paying your staff, all of the insurances. There's this whole compliance and legal side, making sure you have the experts that you need, whether it's a business consultant, a fractional CFO, lawyers, insurance experts. If you have a financial advisor, that helps you, or business developer that helps you, that's going to be another category. So it's kind of a hard answer to give without having a specific type of business to give it to. But a lot of those categories and templates are available on the Money, Truth, and Life course that we were just referencing. So if you have, a business where you're now doing an online store, or you have you're making these amazing tea cakes, and now you want to market your tea cakes, to everybody in your city. There are templates available for you to figure out how much you should be spending in each category. So look those up.
Excellent. So since we're talking about this too, now you've also come across folks who, if you're starting out, or even if you already have 1 year under your belt as a business, right? I don't want to say, well, part of it is being frugal, but we decided to just wear multiple hats. And I think you've seen what happens with folks who wear multiple hats and don't want to delegate this or hire somebody to help them with all of that, right? Can you talk a little bit about making sure you have all the right pieces of the puzzle to kind of, well, you've seen it, right? So
yeah, this is a hard one because when you start, you finally, you're putting money in, you're putting tears in, you're so invested in doing your thing, whatever your activity is to get it going. And, if it was fun at first, there's a while where maybe it's not so fun because you're trying to do it all. And most people in business will tell you, if it's a startup, right, it's like closely held small business at first, you need to hire help before you can afford it. And it sounds so crazy, but it's like you can't afford not to have someone help you with accounting or with, the bookkeeping. Maybe that's your thing and you like to do it, but you need to be doing what your business does, whatever that is. Maybe if it's an accounting business, that's different, right? But if you're selling, tea cakes and cupcakes to your neighbors, and you want to build that into a storefront, downtown, you can do that, but not if you're doing 10 hours a day of paperwork and trying to keep track of the orders and trying to develop the marketing and take pictures of your products. You've got to get help. And it's so easy these days to get fractional help. So just get what you need. Find some interns, find some young people that are starting business. Maybe they could be partner with you, maybe, instead of just staff. But you've got to find help before you think you can afford it. Almost every business owner, when they look back, they say, why did I wait?
Yeah.
I waited too long. I just, I cost myself time in development by not getting the help sooner.
Yeah. And again, I'm glad you're touching on that because that seems to come up a lot. And all of a sudden, this is also what makes or breaks people as well, too, right? Because you get so overwhelmed and it's like, this isn't worth it. And you walk away from potentially being one of the greatest ideas you may have or businesses, period.
Yeah. I quit and I'm just going to go get a job with benefits. Right. And then, and it's so sad because now that amazing thing you brought to the world isn't out there. And maybe somebody else will do something kind of like it later, but it should have been you, right? So
Right.
that's sad when that happens.
So let's talk about also, obviously we talked about personal finances, we talked about personal insurance, but there's also the other aspect of the business side of it where folks don't realize that you need insurance, right? What types of insurance? And obviously it's going to depend on the business, but as a general rule, how much insurance should someone have, when they're starting out a business, or even if they're already established, things that they should be looking at?
Well, there's several categories of insurance, just like, in your personal life. So I would say the first one to think about is the tort liability. If somebody got hurt or if something happened, even the business protection, you have a staff member that you thought was honest and they weren't. And there goes your computers, there goes your money, embezzlement or whatever. There's insurance for things like that. So business insurance. If you're providing some kind of a service as a professional, there's errors and omissions. They call it E&O insurance or professional liability insurance. If you're an accountant or a lawyer or something like that, which usually they make you do that. But if not, you want to look into, is this something I should have? If I made a mistake or allegedly made a mistake, well, that have to come out of my pocket, or should I be insured just in case something happened that I had no idea that could happen? And that's a big one, especially out here. We're in California and we're a little bit litigious here. We have a reputation that is well-deserved. And so having that kind of coverage, I think, is a big deal. So you think about the what we call P&C, property and casualty insurance. That's going to be insurance on your vehicle or your vehicles. If you're delivering something or you've got trucks, if you're a contractor, you probably have, people driving trucks maybe that you own or insure. So you want to make sure that's all in place. And then later in a mature business, if you have a partnership or you have key players in your business and you want to make sure if you don't live, your business does, right? For the sake of your spouse or your family or your partners, you can have life insurance in place that actually helps sustain the business or a buyout down the road. So those are some of the insurances that kind of top of mind come to me as I'm thinking about the answer to your question.
No, excellent. I appreciate that. But because again, it's something that you need, but people forget when I get around to it, right? We talked about also even doing wills and trusts, and that's also something that's also related to business that we've talked about before. And in the future, we're going to talk a little bit more. So you guys are aware of some of the things that you need in place, and God forbid something ever happens to you or your partner or whatever it is on there as well too. So, hey, we're coming to the tail end of our show, and you know what that means, right? All right, Judy, tell us what you got for this week's challenge.
All right, this week's challenge. Here's what we're going to do. For you thinking about starting a business, think about the biggest need. We've covered several categories today of things that you want to know to not make a big mistake causing an implosion, right, in your new business. And if you already have a business, I want you to think about maybe not your biggest need, but your biggest gap. Do you have the right insurance in place? Do you have the right team members sitting on the bench, right? Do you have the right SEO? Do you have the right marketing and IT people? Do you have the right accountant? Do you need to get an accountant and quit trying to do it yourself? What's the biggest gap? I think that's the first thing, to just really sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and consider, what's the biggest gap? The second thing is, what is needed? So if I were to fill that gap, what do I need? Is it someone I need to hire? Is it a insurance policy I need to consider? Is it a lawyer I need to get on board? Do I need a certain person to carry a role for operations or development or compliance? Who do I need to bring in? What is needed to fill the gap that I'm perceiving currently in my business? And then number 3 is write down what you're going to do about it. You've got to convert what I should do into what I will do. Right? So by Sunday at 5:00, I will do this thing. I will make this call. I will ask for this referral or this reference. I will learn this concept or research some information. I will sell a truck, buy a truck, hire someone, or put one of those ads out, to get just the right staff member, and start doing that. But you've got to implement. this information is good and fun and hopefully a little entertaining for you. But if you don't implement something, if you don't do something about what you've learned and apply it, it's just time spent. And you're a little smarter, but you didn't really get the juice out of it, right?
Right.
So you've got to do that. Find the gap, make a little short list of what's needed, and then the action items that you will translate that into this week to start making progress toward that goal.
Awesome, folks. And that's your Money Truth Challenge for this week. So make sure you share your responses with us. Send us a message. Let us know how you guys are doing with that. And with that said, thank you for joining us today. Make sure that you watch the beginning of the show. We did answer a lot of great questions. Judy actually answered a lot of great questions regarding our business planning and different things, especially if you're starting out or you already have a business established as well, too. So keep in mind, we're here every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Watch us. If you're not following Judy, please do so at judycopenbarger.com. All of our social media links are on there as well, too. So we look forward to hearing from you. Judy, any last parting words?
Yeah, make this the best week ever in your business or the development of your business and take it to the next level.
Awesome. All right. See you guys next week. And Judy, always a pleasure. See you next week.
Bye-bye.